Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have an unusual show this evening. You know, generally I say my shows are safe for work. You don't have to wear earbuds. You can just blast it away, and people don't talk about too controversial things. But I think we're going to be talking a little bit about sex in this show. So just keep that in mind. So. It's a different type of show. Now, I actually watched the movie. It's called Love and Saucers. The producer, filmmaker, director is Brad Abrahams, our guest this evening. Great guy. So I watched the show with trying to have an open mind. It was really kind of strange but interesting at the same time. Quite a concept. So we're going to be talking about that. Before Brad comes on, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with UFO updates. And if you support the show, I want to thank you very much. If you can't support the show, we actually have a show producer now that's doing some pretty great things. His name is Evan. He's doing some great things with video during YouTube and images and things like that. So the YouTube experience should be a little bit better, hopefully. So, and anyone can watch a full show on YouTube. For your media player, if you support the show, you can have the full 2-hour shows in your media player, iPhone, etc. We did have a little glitch a couple of days ago. We had our RSS feed went down, and but that was repaired thanks to Sam down in Peru, helped us out. So that's back and running. And also, we are on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and that's every Thursday evening. And that's at 10 to midnight. A lot of people check us out over there on that show. And again, I want to thank everyone that supports the show. Without you supporting the show, I couldn't afford to do it. So I do appreciate it a lot. And I'm really looking forward to doing our show the week after next, which is going to be live out at the UFO Congress. And guess who's going to be there? Alejandro, welcome to the show.
Hello. Yes, I will be there.
I hope you are. You better show up. So yeah, I bet you're looking forward to that. You are working like crazy trying to get all that done.
I am.
I know, I put on many events throughout my life, big auctions and things like that, and helped out with a lot of events. And I know how much work that can be. People don't understand how much work it is, but it's a lot.
They don't understand.
Yeah, they just see you up there in your nice little tux and doing your deal. When there's many, many hours and weeks and months of planning that goes into this. But it's going to be a great one this year. I can't wait for it.
I think so. Really excited. Busy. I don't know. You can see a little bit of disaster in the background. Although I think it's always been a disaster in the background when I am doing the home office video. But yes, really busy putting everything together. Very excited, though.
Yeah.
Not that I've seen it completely, but the interview with Luis Elizondo, the guy who ran the DoD program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, our exclusive interview with questions from you all. So I don't know, some of your listeners probably sent some in, but that's been recorded. He said he answered as many questions as he could.
Oh, wow.
So it's in the can.
Oh, my goodness. I can't wait. And you're going to be actually premiering that. It's going to be during the conference itself, right?
At the conference, it'll be kind of the premiere lecture spot Saturday evening at about 4 o'clock. And then after that will be the exciting award ceremony.
All right. Wow. Again, I had so much fun, especially the last time I went. The first time I couldn't stay the whole show. The last time it was just magical. I can't wait to get into that beautiful inn there, the resort. It's just fantastic. And I can't wait for warm weather. My goodness. It's, been freezing here.
Yeah, I don't know about today. I've been stuck inside, but yesterday it got up to 80.
Nice. That's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Sunny skies.
Yeah, that's right. So what's happening in the UFO world?
What's happening? So a couple things. SETI did a podcast about the DoD program, New UFO Evidence, they called it. I really didn't hear much. I read a little bit about it, and I didn't listen because, to be honest, I love you, Mr. Seth Shostak, but listening to you talk about UFOs is a complete waste of time because you're not educated on the topic. So, and which is frustrating because he's a scientist, and I don't like it when scientists kind of talk out of their butt. And it's very frustrating. And what's funny, and I'd love to get him one day to talk to him and debate a little bit with him because he has a great sense of humor. But
Yes,
he does all of this
Yeah.
talk about, all of his lectures are about how there are aliens out there and intelligent aliens out there, and there has to be. And he does the statistics, the math, and they've got to be out there. So it's just so close-minded and silly for him just to not even consider the possibilities that could exist. And what's even more frustrating is that this UFO evidence, like the title they've used, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with aliens, which then really takes it completely out of the realm of his specialty. So they just love to bash, I think, and belittle, which is frustrating because they used to be in that spot. They used to be the fringe, and people used to make fun of the whole SETI program. And now that they're kind of on top and everybody's, at least in the science world, NASA space world, is really on board with looking for alien life. Now they are just so dismissive. So that was something interesting.
Yeah, I've had Seth on two times on my show, and I recently sent him an invite. I haven't heard back from him. He did tell me he gets about 4,000 emails a month, literally.
Wow.
So I understand that it's hard to to talk to everybody, but I found I said to him when I talked to him, I said to him something along the lines, well, if they were actually visiting here and there was evidence of that, what would it do to your job? Basically. Then he said that he needed a wing in the Smithsonian full of, crash saucers before that would be enough evidence for UFOs.
Yeah, which is just a silly statement because that's not how science works. You don't, let's take the gorilla who they didn't believe was real. You don't wait and as a scientist until they have a gorilla in a zoo before you start to investigate whether or not there's gorillas or not.
That's a good point.
Completely ridiculous and backwards. What you do is, based off of anecdotal evidence, you go begin to investigate and gather some data, and maybe you find something, maybe you don't. But these statements, because Tyson made a similar comment, until you can bring one to dinner. Well, that's completely backwards.
Are they bringing dark matter?
Point.
Are they bringing dark matter to dinner?
That's it. See, and that's a great point because people question even the scientist who discovered that the universe is expanding, which began to make them hypothesize of whether or not that there might be something called dark matter that accounts for that. That scientist, she doesn't even believe in dark matter. She thinks the answer's I mean, that is still a contested idea, even though people like them, astrophysicists especially, take it for granted that it's a foregone conclusion when it's not. So, yeah, that's a really great point. And, so they're looking for it, and they're not waiting for dark matter to come to dinner before they look for it. So, yeah, all good points.
Right, yeah. So what else?
Otherwise,
yeah.
And these are all in the headlines for people to look at. If you go to openminds.tv, look at the daily UFO headlines, you'll see this. Of course, there's some on the front page, but if you go in the articles to the drop down, you can go see the rest of the daily UFO headlines. And I want people to do this because there's another interesting one there, and this is from the 29th. What's that, Monday? The same day as the SETI Institute one. This is a Gizmodo article, and I don't know if you saw this one, but this is a really fun one. It's called "If You Find Aliens, Who Do You Call?" And so
Alien Busters. No.
Yeah, the gist of the article is they called who they thought you would call just to see what they would say, and the answers were really interesting. The first person they called was Shostak. And he gave kind of a nuanced answer, an answer about here's what we're looking for. And then he goes on to kind of bash people who believe in other things. But some of the other ones are really interesting. So, for example, NASA. They called NASA and said, do we call you? And then NASA said, well, we would probably send you to the DOD since our mission doesn't have to do with aliens. Then there was news that of this job opening for a planetary protection officer. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
They actually filled that position recently, and there was a story about that, which is really interesting. But they asked the former one, because they must have called a couple days ago. And that person said, well, it depends if it's a big alien or a small alien. If it's intelligent, it's probably going to have to go to the Air Force or maybe even the UN. And so some really interesting, the Air Base wing, the 88th Air Base, they called. The public affairs, and they said, to be honest, we don't know. We don't have any guidance for that sort of situation. So they asked a bunch of people. They asked the scientists at Berkeley, a lot of really interesting people. Those were some of the funnier answers. But yeah, really cool article. And it's really an interesting article because it shows how much thought some of these people have put towards some of this, and mostly it's been very little. So yeah, I love that article. It's really interesting, really fun.
So who did they find for that position, and what is that person's background?
I don't know. The job itself has to do with biology. It's mainly looking for contaminants.
Oh, I see.
And their job is to make sure that the astronauts are not contaminating other planets, as well as making sure the astronauts are not contaminating our planet. So that would, of course, mean life. So, but it's very interesting. So that person kind of comes up with protocols around that sort of thing as the actual job. But I remember, I think she's a biologist of some sort, microbiologist.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wow.
One more story.
Yeah.
That is a lot of fun. And this is Zachary Quinto is going to be the host of a reboot of In Search Of.
Oh, I talked to Mark D'Antonio a little bit about this. Just briefly. He's going to be involved in one of the shows. That's great.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how fun is that? Yeah, it's the History Channel that's going to be doing this. And In Search Of, if you don't remember, it was with Leonard Nimoy.
Leonard Nimoy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know who started it?
Uh-uh.
It was actually started by Rod Serling.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. In fact, I had a couple copies of this. I don't know if I even do anymore, but the first couple of episodes were actually movie length, and they were inspired by Von Daniken, and the Ancient Aliens. So they were around the Ancient Aliens topic. They were kind of copying his movies, to be honest. And so they did a couple movies. Then Rod Serling was able to get it turned into a television show, but he passed away before the show began. So they got Leonard Nimoy to host it. And, of course, they're so funky because they're the 70s music and style. Yeah. Such a weird show, but a lot of fun, really cool, because it's kind of like sightings or something like that, going over paranormal and stuff like that from the olden days. So you got to explain this to the young guys because they're like, what the heck is In Search Of? Or they maybe have been wondering who Leonard Nimoy is. But go Google In Search Of and you'll be able to see what these old episodes look like. Very, very cool stuff. Lots of interesting interviews that they got back then on all of these topics. So it's really fun that they're going to be rebooting it. I'm a fan of Zachary Quinto. Of course, he's Spock, who plays the new Spock, where Leonard Nimoy used to play Spock. So that's where the link is, and it's kind of cool.
Wow!
Because in New York, we ran into him. I saw him coming out of a shop, and he walked over. Yeah, off of Broadway, and it was kind of cool to see him. Very tall gentleman.
Is he? Wow. Yeah. Hey, did you happen to catch the interview with Hal Puthoff the other night?
I didn't. I've read about it. I've been so swamped, of course, that I haven't had the time to listen.
Yeah.
I've read people's comments and everything. But that's another great point that Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis were.
That's right. Yep.
On Coast to Coast, and that's interesting because they worked with Bigelow, so they were part of Bigelow's program, NIDS, which is a National Institute of Discovery Sciences, which later became BASS, which was his Bigelow Aerospace. Advanced Aeronautics, something like that was what BASS stood for, but essentially is a department where they looked into UFOs and stuff, and Skinwalker Ranch. So Eric Davis actually has, I'm not sure if he spoke about these on the show, but some really interesting stories related to Skinwalker Ranch.
He did talk a little bit about it. Some of the things that Hal Puthoff talked about are just amazing, and I'm hoping to hear him talk more about it. The interview went way too fast, but one of the things that you don't really hear a lot about is there's so much corroborating radar evidence along with, say, for instance, the Nimitz sighting. I mean, there's so much more to that than what meets the eye, and people look at the video and and just say it's it's a hoax or it's this or that, but they don't know the background of it. He talks about the background of it, and it's fascinating.
That's great, because that's one thing that's been a bit frustrating is that we have this few seconds of a clip of a video. And people have made so much out of this. They've analyzed it, said they've come to certain conclusions, but you certainly can't. Some of the skeptics, of course, coming to different conclusions than they feel that the DoD came to. But there's so much more evidence out there. They haven't even seen the whole case, and they're building everything off of this little clip. And I did get information. The reason why that clip is so small is they can't include in the clip anything that's classified. And of course, many of the systems or even the protocols and how they talk to each other, there's so much classified around, live active military projects or programs or missions that there's very little you can share publicly.
Yes, also I noticed that Hal was very cautious about what he talked about, and he did mention there's still quite a bit involved in this that is still classified that he can't talk about. But he did, it's definitely, if you get a chance to check it out, it's a great interview. Anyone that has a coast-to-coast membership or whatever it is, it's one of the better interviews I've heard in a long time. It's great.
I think it's up on YouTube, because you know how people will put them up on YouTube, and you're not supposed to with Coast to Coast, but so it might get taken down eventually. But I know someone had sent me a link. It's up on YouTube.
Right. I think that's down already. I actually looked for it just before the show. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, just subscribe. It's not that expensive to subscribe to the Coast thing if you want.
That's right. And so we will meet one more time before the UFO Congress in a couple of weeks.
That is correct, my friend.
All right. So thanks so much, Alejandro, and I'll talk to you next week.
My pleasure. And it's ufocongress.com to register. I guess we should tell people that.
Yes.
ufocongress.com.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. See ya.
Talk to you later. All right, everyone. So our guest is it's Brad Abrahams, and he is a documentary filmmaker and a commercial director from Canada. He's currently based in the U.S. I think he's in sunny, warm Florida right now. And his all-consuming interests are radical science, cryptozoology, I always have a problem with that word, cryptozoology, and general esoterica inspired by stories. And Love and Saucers, we're going to be talking about, is his first feature-length film, and it's a good one. I watched it actually 2 times. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes, thank you, and good to have you on. Wanted to ask, first of all, what sparked your interest in this type of, oh, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, there's a painting in the background right behind Brad.
Yeah, that's one of David's original paintings, and he gave that to me after we finished shooting with him.
Yeah. So what sparked your interest in the whole topic? Just as I read, you had all these interests.
Yeah, it's been lifelong. Just always had a sort of hunger and drive to explore the unknown or the sort of little known topics that you really have to search for to learn about. So, I started reading the Fortean Times magazine when I was younger, and it just blossomed from there. So I consider myself a Fortean.
And had you done any short films along the lines of this, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I did one recently, a cryptozoology themed short film that was on the skunk ape, which is the Bigfoot of the Florida Everglades. I wanted to do something sort of in my own backyard. And it's actually going to be playing, if you're in the Bay Area in March, there's a Bigfoot bonanza, a Bigfoot themed screening at the Balboa Theater, if you want to catch it on the big screen.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the closest short film that I've done around these topics. And then I am in production or pre-production on a feature-length cryptozoology film.
Oh, we have done. I had another show for a short time called The Everything Else, and what it was is I wanted to talk about other topics on this show, but people were listening because they wanted to hear a UFO show. So
Yeah.
I had two shows going, which was too much for. I'm a pretty busy guy in general. I just couldn't do both shows, but we did have some interesting shows and interesting people on, and there's it's another mystery, another mystery to explore
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah, and there's also subsets of belief that they're related.
Yeah,
that all of these experiences are related.
That's right. Yeah,
but yeah, that's a whole other topic to get into.
Yeah, that's right. So Michael Huggins, interesting guy.
Well, that's Michael's his son. It's David is the.
Oh, I'm sorry, David.
Yeah.
David, that's right. Yeah, pardon me. So David Huggins, interesting guy. You want to tell the listener a little bit? Well, first of all, how did you even find him? And is this something you heard about, or how did that all begin?
Yeah, so it was years ago. I think like 2012 or 2011. I was on like a cross country bus trip and had loaded up my iPod with just a bunch of podcasts, and one of them was on the Abduction Experience, and they talk about various abductees and experiencers, and they mentioned David sort of offhand, like it was too out there and too bizarre to even include in their show. And the line that I remember clearly was that then there's David Huggins, who fathered 100 space babies throughout the galaxy. And that obviously stuck with me. And I made a mental note, like I've got to search this out when I'm back. And I tried to, and there was almost nothing online about him, which was interesting. I think coming from my generation, if something's not online, it doesn't exist. So I had to do a lot of sleuthing and eventually track down his neighbor, Farah Yurtzu. Maybe some of your listeners have heard of her. She's another experiencer who happened to be his neighbor, and she had done a photo book of his paintings, and so that sort of gave me a introduction to him and his work, and also gave me his phone number. And so I called him up, sort of a cold call, since he didn't do email, and just pitched an idea to him, just that I'd like to do some sort of film. And he was immediately receptive. And I learned that, very few people contact him because it's almost impossible to find his information.
And did you have any hesitancy, were you hesitant at all to take this type of project on, since it's so far out there?
Yeah, well, the main question, with any film project is there like a story here that can sustain an hour or more? And I thought that, it was definitely worth trying. And the first thing that he said to me when we chatted on the phone was, Brad, I don't know much, but what I do know for sure is at 17, I lost my virginity to an extraterrestrial woman. And just that sort of was hook and sinker. And thought, at least I'll go, visit for a few days and film and see if there's something here. And yeah, the rest is history.
And were you there a long time? Did you stay in Hoboken?
Yeah, I actually just a few days at first, and I stayed at his house. he
That must have been
graciously,
interesting.
yeah, he offered, and I accepted, funding it myself. It was like a welcome invitation, and I actually slept in his ex-wife's bed. He lives with her, and she was on
Oh,
vacation. Yeah, and so I got the full experience, and I'd wake up and start filming and film all up until nighttime when he would go to bed, and just got a real great sense of like who he was, his story, and I still wasn't quite sure after that trip if I was going to pursue it, but when I put up a trailer a couple of years later, it just exploded with interest. There's like hundreds of thousands of views. It got a lot of press, so I was able to drum up some funds to actually finish it and make it into a feature. So a few years later, and over the course of a year, finished filming with him.
a friend of mine contacted me tonight. He's listening. He actually is. He's one of these people that watches a drawbridge. That's his job. So
Okay.
he gets a lot of downtime. He writes. He does all kinds of things, and so he's listening tonight. And I told him the theme of the story, and he goes, "Oh, the two most searched things on the internet: sex and UFOs."
Right, together.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why that exploded. I'm sure
Yeah.
it went viral. Yeah. So when you're filming this and you're seeing him and talking to him eye to eye, how do you feel? Do you feel like what he's saying is credible? And of course, I want to know some of the details. We got to talk about some of the details.
Yeah. So, and it's not just me, but as soon as I met him, I sort of was disarmed by how down to earth he is. Simply spoken, very direct, doesn't mince words, and is just not who you think he's going to be when you meet him. And I was impressed by that, and it made me, I already came into it with an open mind, because what's the point otherwise? But it actually opened my mind more and made me more receptive to consider what he's saying more seriously. And since then, like the crew, when I introduced him to the crew later on, that's what each person said meeting him was, wow, like, he's just like a sweet older guy. And then the same for his neighbors that met him, and then same for, everyone else that's met him since then. So that just meeting him in person, and I tried to convey that in the film too, can really shift your beliefs alone from what he's actually telling you.
Right. That part when he, in the film, when he actually tells his now ex-wife the whole deal, that was, he basically is like he's coming out to her saying this happened, and that was it. That was the end of the relationship, right? Is that
Yeah.
Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, and I don't know, he wouldn't talk to me about that for years, and so I don't know how much more is going on there, but it seemed like that was the main impetus for their divorce. Was she just didn't, I guess, know how to process it at the time, and really how do you if you didn't see that coming. So I think it was maybe the last straw. Maybe there was another strain on the marriage, but yeah, it caused a divorce. But I think very unique to divorced couples, they actually moved in together shortly after. Part of it was their son, who was young at the time. It was really hard on him, the separation, and then they actually like each other, and they're good friends. So it's just, a friendship, non-romantic roommates, basically, now, and they've been living together for 20 years. And I think that also says something about David, that is, even his ex-wife would move back in with him.
Yes, I want to say a little shout out to Mike Blake in the chat room. I know you've had some medical issues. It's good to see you in there. I hope you're doing okay, and I hope you hang in there and keep going. So, by the way, we do have a chat room. We'll be asking. We'll be getting some questions from that later on. And
okay.
We also do take calls occasionally. We get calls coming in. And all right, so back to David. So he thinks things have happened when he was started. I think it was 8 years old, right? Is that when he?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was at 8.
So why don't you kind of give a little background of what some of the things he was talking about that happened to him?
Yeah, it started off like pretty classic abductee experience. So when he was 8, actually the very first one was odd. It was an almost mini Bigfoot, a little hairy guy, as he called him, coming out of the forest when he was playing outside, and actually having the feeling that he was looking at himself through the eyes of this beast, and then got terrified and ran away. So that was the very first experience. Then the second was with an insect or mantis-like creature, another like terrifying experience for an 8-year-old. And those were both like broad daylight experiences around his house. And then the third was the real classic experience where the Greys came into his bedroom while he was still awake and led him outside. And then you can see in the painting on my wall, sort of floated him up to the craft. And inside he met the woman and implanted some kind of device up his nose. And then he woke up the next day and had a nosebleed. And that's how it all started for him. And then that was the only time where he felt pain or sort of like abused. But since then, it was a lot of classic UFO type experiences, like being in the craft, going through portals, seeing and hearing things, meeting different beings. And it wasn't until he was 17 that the real like formative experience happened, which was losing his virginity to that extraterrestrial quote unquote female. And I found it was interesting that they at least waited for him to be like of age before it happened, it's kind of nice. Makes it, I think it's just be a very different film and a very different story if it had been otherwise. But as like when you're 17, it's sort of not quite as traumatic.
Yeah. And when he's explaining, this happening, does he, I mean, it just kind of like naturally happened according to his story, but was it something that, do you think that he was like looking forward to happening again? And, I mean, if these things were really happening, I think it'd be like the weirdest thing in the world. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. At first, he didn't know what to think. Very bizarre, obviously, especially being his first like sexual experience. But as he got a bit older, like into his 20s, he really did start looking forward to it, and actually like felt a bond and even like a love for this female, and there would be very frequent visits for a time.
Some of the people you interviewed in the film was one of them I thought was really great was the deli owner, the owner of the deli that he worked at.
Yeah.
He works part-time at a deli, and the guy's like no judgment, and he believes him.
Yeah, exactly. And it was great to hear like coming from this, Italian immigrant, older guy who I thought before meeting him that he'd be like, yeah, it's really crazy that he thinks this, but he's a good guy, so whatever. But no, it was so refreshing that he came at it from a completely like non-judgmental perspective, and he's like, I haven't seen any of these guys or met anyone. I haven't believe him. I believe him. I believe what he says.
Now, how about you? What do you believe?
I think that's complex, because I don't think anyone really knows for certain. It's hard to be definitive about it, but I can say that I believe him close to 100%, in that he's describing experiences as he experienced them and as he paints them very vividly, that he's had these experiences and remembers these experiences. If those happened in sort of hard reality, like let's say if someone was there with him, would they have seen that same thing? I don't know, and that's the harder question to answer. And also, is it literal? Are these extraterrestrials that are flying in a ship from out there to visit him and abduct him? That's another question as well. Or is it another experience, and this is as he remembers it? What they call screens or memory screens. So I think there's 10 or more different levels of belief. But what's most important is that I believe him, and I believe other people who are relaying their experiences, but can't say for certain what those experiences really are, like if they're taken at face value or not.
I've always wondered when people that are talking, about their experiences that they happen repeatedly. I always wonder, why would it happen repeatedly,
Yeah.
in real life to this same person over and over again? Is
Yeah.
that something you talk to him about?
Yeah, and a lot of the real famous lasting abductee experiences are one-time events. So I think David's there. There are others like Strieber's who happened multiple times, but I think it's in the minority, and makes his case unique. Especially, I think there's over like 100 of these encounters, and I've asked him why him and why he thinks they visit him so often. And he doesn't really know, but he thinks, if he had to rack his brain about it, that it has to do with the breeding and the creation of these hybrid children.
Yeah, you do hear quite a bit of people, discussing that possibility. So he was in rural Georgia, basically. Yeah. But did it follow him when he moved?
Yeah. He actually moved twice, so from like one part of Georgia to another, and they followed, and then when he moved to Manhattan, and then later New Jersey, they followed.
That's I mean, you hear that a lot, and maybe when they said they implanted something in his nose, maybe that was a homing device, or that's
what he thinks.
Yeah, that's speculation. So what about skeptics? How does he deal with them?
Yeah, he pays them no mind at all, because he's not trying to prove anything, and he's not trying to prove anything because he doesn't know what happened to him. He's relaying experiences as as they happen to him, but he's not claiming to know where they're from, what they're doing, and why. So he's not as, I guess, he doesn't have like a stake in the game. So when people say, you're crazy or this couldn't have happened, he's like, well, that's, you can believe that, but I know what happened to me. And so he just completely shrugs off any kind of skeptics. But he also says, why would I like talk about these? I mean, these are really like extremely embarrassing experiences too. And something I think most people wouldn't want to talk about publicly, especially unless they were integral to your story. So yeah, that's another line that he uses.
Now I know that he read Bud Hopkins' book.
Yeah.
And he probably read that after Bud had already passed away, did he?
No, he it was before Bud passed away, and they actually chatted a few times, and I think they met one or two times as well. Yeah.
The reason I was asking that if they did talk, did Bud actually think that his story was unique, or had he heard other stories similar? Do you happen to know that?
Uh, I think he thought, I mean, there's definitely aspects, like if you read Intruders, there's a lot of similar aspects, and which is probably why they triggered so many memories for David. But then there's about half or more that aren't similar at all. That's surprised Bud.
Ah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I also know that he, in the film, he says that he goes to, or there is a support group. I don't know if he actually goes to it, but you did filming. It was called Space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Harold Egan's group out in Brooklyn. And I don't know how often they meet anymore. But yeah, he would go to those group meetings, and they would often bring like art that experiencers had created to share. And I think he found it, it at least made him feel like he wasn't alone. But ultimately, he stopped going. It wasn't so helpful for him, because I think it's most helpful for people that, where there was a trauma and they still have a lot of unanswered questions and maybe aren't remembering everything. But for David, uniquely, he remembers everything and he had a good time, like he enjoyed it. It wasn't like most people, like a terrifying, horrible experience. It was largely positive. I mean, for him, when I look at all the experiences, I don't know if I would call them that, but for David, it was a good time.
So now his ex-wife is living with him. Has anything happened to your knowledge while they were together?
No, I don't think so. I think that while they were together, I don't think he remembers anything happening.
I see. And now, has anything happened since they had their divorce or got separated? I mean,
yeah, but since his sort of older age, the last 20 years or so, the encounters have not only diminished like greatly in frequency, but also in quality. So now they're sort of more dreamlike, and they're not like these vivid waking daytime experiences. They're more like impressions. So I think since which is also interesting, because as you get older, your reproductive capabilities also probably diminish as well, and it seems like the aliens' interest in him diminished around that time as well.
how about that? I know a lot of people that claim they're experiencers do also say that later on in life things stop. So
Yeah.
I mean, you do hear that. You do hear that a lot. I haven't had too many experiencer type people on this show. I've had a few. There's some noted ones like Travis Walton, the Allagash incident. Some people from that. I don't know if you ever heard of that one. But there are some encounters that I think, wow, there's really something to this.
Right.
I got to be honest with you. I'm a little on the fence on this. But I still think it's interesting, and I think it's also interesting that he said, he needed to start painting. He never painted before, so can you talk about that?
Yeah. So he had painted, but sort of recreationally, doing some still lives and landscapes, and of like a medium talent level, and then. I think during the most like psychologically difficult time for him, when he was trying to process these experiences as an adult, was going through the divorce, was really thinking he was losing it, was losing his grip on reality. Thinking people were there when they weren't, not being able to sleep. He got a message from the beings, or he had an encounter with them, and they said, "You should paint these experiences," and did. It started to immediately felt better. He was able to sleep. The psychological difficulties he was having were gone. Everything changed once he started getting these memories out and onto the canvas. So it's sort of like a therapy. And because
Yeah.
of that, I think something else that sort of, I've heard a lot of people say, he's just trying to sell paintings, but the reality is he never showed anyone the paintings for 20-something years until we started filming. He just, once he finished a painting, they just like went up against the wall in his attic. And I think one of the only places they were shown was like a random hair salon in Hoboken, which would be pretty trippy as getting your nails done and seeing these paintings. But yeah, so it seemed like an essential part of his journey to do this art, and I don't think that's too unique. I think it's, especially for paranormal, supernatural, or traumatic experiences, expressing creatively in this way is I think one of the more effective ways to deal with it, as opposed to thinking about it like analytically, rationally, thinking, why did it happen to me? Who are they? What are they? Instead, it's a creative expression can get you much further than that.
Yeah, it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like journaling. I've heard a lot of people talk about journaling to work through something.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, why in his depictions of these creatures, why is their face white and the rest of them are flesh tone?
Yeah, so that's how he saw them. And he thought maybe it's like they're wearing a mask, that the faces are a mask. And who knows what's under that mask. And similarly with the hair, he at one point saw her with the hair gone, and then she put it on sort of like a wig, and that she was actually bald like the Greys, and that the hair was more something to make them look more human, more attractive.
Now, did he ever? I know that he had a variable creatures. Were there ever any of the so-called gray?
Yeah, there were a lot of little Greys.
Yeah. I just didn't remember that in the movie.
Yeah.
And the mantis, that that's another one that's brought up. I can't. Oh, that would like be there as part of the team, or it's funny. I had Kathy Marden that does a lot of work. She's also Betty Hill's niece, but she does a lot of work on experiencers, and a lot of them claim this mantis type figure as among other type of creatures altogether, which is another bizarre thing.
Yeah, and the mantis in David's case seemed almost like a chaperone, like he was always just there, especially when there was a sexual encounter going on. The mantis would just sort of stay in the corner and watch, and maybe he was just a pervert. But back on the ship, he seemed to be the one who was in charge. So if there were questions like David, wanted to stay, or he wanted to see the hybrid children, they would always have to ask the mantis. So he seemed in the hierarchy higher up there.
So let's talk about the children. What did David know about those? I know the babies were dying or something at one time, right?
Yeah. So he knew that the babies were his, or they said that they were his, and that they had sort of been incubated from his sperm, collected who knows how, I think in different ways, and that at first they were unhealthy or sick or dying, and he had to make contact with them and then show the women how to nurse them, how to hold them. It seemed like they had no idea how to actually care for a baby. And once he showed them, then they did a lot better. And then over the years, David would once in a while get to visit them, get to see them, and they would grow up looking more and more human, but with the bigger black eyes.
One of the things I've thought of in this type of situation, just trying to work out in my mind how these things would work, is if there were hybrid, why would they stay on a ship? I mean, is the ship, wouldn't they go back to a planet? Or, that just seems like bizarre that they'd be always on a ship. I mean, I've heard other
Yeah,
people
and-
say similar things.
Yeah, and also is the question, like, are they extraterrestrial or not? Are they interdimensional? Maybe they're not from far away. And maybe when they go somewhere, it's not on a ship or by a ship. But like, that's another thing he said, is maybe, they're not spacecraft, but they're more like portals to other places.
Did he actually talk about what it was like? He mentioned going on a craft. Did he talk about what the interior was like on that craft at all?
Yeah, not very technological was what he remembered. That it seemed like fairly simple, clean, bright, quiet. Didn't really mention too many details, but didn't seem like, what we would consider science fiction spaceship.
Travis Walton, I'm sure you heard that name.
Yeah.
I tried to get more details out of him from what he remembered the inside of the ship. And as far as I remember, he talks about it being pretty simple.
Right.
Which is, maybe, I have no idea. Like I said, this stuff is kind of far out there for me, but it's still, it's still interesting to talk about. That's why you're on the show.
Right.
And so other experiencers that he has interacted with, what do they think of his story?
I think that they are just impressed. I think they believe him, first off. But I think they're just impressed by the detail with which he remembers everything. And I think that's because of his skill as a painter, able to sort of record things almost cinematically. Like, that's what I thought when I first saw the paintings, that each one is sort of like a movie scene or a shot in a movie. And that skill, thematically,
There
for
is an
thousands
orange
of
yellowish
years.
light comes
Hold,
up.
hold on just one minute.
Sure.
Just
problem.
1 second.
David is looking
We
at
have
the
a
light
technical
and doesn't
problem
hurt
here.
his
We have
eyes.
some
He is
audio
aware of
coming
the
over.
beings. They are standing over him. They are touching
Sorry for the
his
listener.
body.
We need the audio changed. Hang on just
My
1
name is
second.
David Huggins. I'm 72 years old, and I live in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Just
I was
1
living
second.
a perfectly normal life until I
We
started
still have audio
remembering
coming over. I'm
things.
just going to let this.
It was just like image
It's actually
upon
your
image upon
trailer's
image.
playing, so
They
we'll just let it
wouldn't
play.
stop.
Okay.
I was so scared. The eyes were just glowing. They hit the ground running straight toward me.
Okay,
And we floated up to some type
so,
of craft.
Evan, we
I
have,
said,
we
"You
have
hurt me,
audio."
You hurt me.
Yeah, thank you.
No, 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 no.
Let me try to do that. Hang on a
This
second.
is the woman I never told anyone
Let me try to
about.
do that.
When I was 17, I lost my virginity to a female extraterrestrial. That's all I can
All right,
say
we need
about
to
it.
get this audio stopped. All right, hang on. Okay, sorry about that. You probably didn't hear anything on your end, but it went over on the YouTube channel. So, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so since that happened, I don't have any idea where we were.
Oh, we were just talking about Jeffrey Kripal. So the
Yes.
idea that the abduction experience is the same thing as mystical experience throughout the ages. So thousands of years, 500 years ago, it could be religious in nature. 500 years before that, pantheistic Greek gods, so on and so on. That these are the same types of experiences, but they get updated with the eras that we live in. But that the source of the experience is the same. And it's very real and it's happening to these people, but that it's not necessarily aliens or beings from light years away traveling here, abducting people for whatever reason and then putting them back. That it's not literally that, but it is something serious that is happening, but not sure what. And I feel like that's maybe an easier entry point for skeptical people, that there's crossover, that it's not just unique to alien abduction, but it's a shared mystical experience.
I think he said something like, science fiction is born from a paranormal experience a lot of times.
Yes, exactly. He wrote a book called Mutants and Mystics, which it sort of goes through the formative figures in science fiction like Philip K. Dick, Ray Palmer from Fate magazine, Charles Fort, and others. And basically all of these people had sort of rich supernatural experiences in their life that drove them to create science fiction. And then that science fiction that they created was content for people's paranormal experiences. So it creates this sort of feedback loop. So a lot of people think like they'll see David's wall of 2,000 VHS tapes and say, oh, well, obviously he watches a ton of sci-fi, so that's why he's seeing these things. But the reality is more like he had experiences, and that's why he is compelled to watch and collect all of this science fiction.
Right. Now, that must have been a real interesting conversation with this professor.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I'd love to have someone like him on the show just to talk about...
I'm sure he'd love to. Yeah, he'd be an excellent interview for sure.
Right. And you said that he personally had an experience. I don't remember him talking about that.
Yeah, he had a pretty like sexual experience as well, but had more to do with more like of a Hindu religious. He was studying the Hindu religion in India at the time, and had this like very traumatizing but also erotic experience with Hindu visuals and motifs.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So if this is along his lines or his thoughts or his philosophy, I know he actually is has a philosophy degree as well as religious background, studies. In this case, what he's talking about, so people they're thinking that they're experiencing these things, and how does it get to be such a detailed situation like David?
Right. I think, I mean, the analogy he uses is like light through stained glass. So the stained glass is the experience we remember, the reflection of the stained glass, those beautiful colors and patterns. But it's the light itself that's the experience. And that's the thing that we can't really see or know. And that the details of someone's experience like David, it does draw from the sort of popular culture that's around us. Just as human beings, we're impressionable. You can't get away from that. So it's things that you read, it's things that you watch, just things that you see and hear are going to color these complex formative type experiences. But that is not just that. And it's, it's a difficult, tough thing to try and explain and work out.
Did you ever talk to him about his childhood when these things were supposedly happening to him? If he ever spoke about the situation to anyone, during that time when things were happening?
Yeah, he tried to talk to his parents about it, and it didn't go well. They thought he was lying, and he got punished or like disciplined for it. And that's another detail in his story is that he had like a pretty difficult childhood, alcoholic parents, and they were fairly abusive. But I don't think enough that would cause him to have this whole escapist narrative. This was rural Georgia in the 50s. I think probably a lot of people drank, and a lot of people. I mean, it was normal to discipline or hit your child. They even did it in school. Not that it was good, but that was not so uncommon. So I think that it probably the trauma. Another thing that Kripal said, the trauma probably opens people up to these types of experiences, makes you more sensitive, but that they aren't the cause of them, and they're not the only explanation. So I think I've had psychologists or psychiatrists come up to me after seeing the film and just say, "Oh, it's obviously he was raped, or, this is from some kind of sexual trauma. But I think that that's just an easy, quick way to rationalize it, but that it's not that simple. Things are more complex than that.
Had he ever seeked any, professional help as far as dealing with any of this?
No, he didn't. I think he was going to, but then once he started painting and started remembering everything, he didn't think it was worth it. And I tried to get him to do hypnotic regression for the film. And he was initially open to it, but then decided not to. And his reasoning was he already remembers everything, so what would be the point? And then I also thought maybe it wasn't the most responsible thing to have him do this on camera. Like, who knows what could have happened psychologically. So, and a lot of, I contacted like 20 hypnotherapists, and only one said they'd agree to do it just because of how sensitive of a situation it would be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, there are tapes for the Betty and Barney Hill regressions that are really, really quite scary, quite haunting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the art show. How did all that happen?
We engineered that. So we did sort of like a pop-up art show in Manhattan. And the reason, I just wanted to know, like, what did people outside of David's like immediate sphere, what would they think of his work? And it was sort of one of the first times unleashing it onto the public. And it was a really great response. I think part of that being like it's Lower East Side Manhattan, so it's like this hipster art crowd anyways that are going to be open to this. But it was such a neat contrast having these like young artsy kids and then this old sort of out there David, and they matched perfectly, and they were almost like in awe of him and his stories.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really fascinating to see, and he was having such a good time, like seeing his work appreciated and not being, people not being too cynical. So it was like a great experience for him overall.
I think so. I mean, I could see that, and also I saw the fact that, like you said, the young people seemed to have an open mind, and they were curious, and they were really fascinated by the pieces, and then started interacting with them.
Yeah,
which I
exactly.
thought was all good stuff. That must have been really good for him. I don't know if he sold anything, but
he did.
He did.
We helped him sell. Yeah, and he had not even thought about it. We had to sort of push him, like, it's okay, you can sell your work. It's he's lives on a 1 day a week part-time job, and then pension. It's barely enough to survive. So I think initially was a little resistant, but then he decided any painting he'd sell, he would repaint so that he would still have it as a memory. And since then, he's sold a few, and we've been selling prints and giving him a advantage.
Now, someone just asked in the chat room, where can they see the artwork? There's actually, did you say you're selling prints, so you have a website?
Yeah, and I have a gallery up as well. It's just loveandsaucers.com, and there's a gallery link, and we've posted like a bunch of his paintings there. There's prints there, and then on the Facebook page, like every other day, we post a new high-quality painting of his.
I see. Wow. Someone wants to know, ask if they projected a screen memory of the woman. In other words, is it a consideration that he may have had screen memories?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider, that it, a lot of this could have been screen memories, and that what actually happened to him could have been like far more traumatic and scary, and that what he remembers is pleasant because that's what he, either wants to remember or whoever wants him to remember. All he had, so answering another question in the chat room, all he had was conscious recall. He never had anything that he thought of later, or? No, he, for the most part, he would forget when an experience would happen. it would sort of, he'd remember, and then it would sort of fade away, like almost sort of like an amnesia. And some things he would hold on to as memories, but it was the Bud Hopkins book that triggered sort of a flood of memories, one after the other, for decades, that really stuck afterwards. So it really was the Bud Hopkins book that was a trigger, and a lot of the words in the chapter called Other Women, Other Men, that opened the floodgates for the memories.
Wow, amazing. And let's see, I know I had one other question that came up. Did he remember them also in dreams as well?
Yeah, yes. And more later in life as dreams, and that's sort of how he sees them now. And interestingly enough, before he saw the film, he told me that the beings came to him in a dream and said that they approve of the film. So we had extraterrestrial endorsement, which felt pretty good. I was actually worried that, if the beings are real and they don't like the film, what would happen to me?
So do you have a little like alien stamp of approval or something? On
Yeah.
that?
Well, we haven't capitalized on that yet, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, and they could maybe you can get them to have their own little rewards.
Yeah.
So I'm going to offer call in. If anyone wants to call in, that number is 603-967-4030. If you're from out of the country, start that with a 1. So that's 603-967-4030. You can call in, or you can ask questions on chat, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Let's see. Was there an intention of a breeding program per se, not just with him, but, we actually have a caller calling in right now. So hang on just a second. Caller, you're on the line. Your first name and where are you calling from?
This is Abner Torres. I'm calling from Florida.
You're from Florida as well. How you doing?
Great.
So what's your... Go ahead.
My question for the gentleman is, when he was doing a documentary, was there...
Oops. Looks like we lost the call. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Brad, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, hang on just a second.
kind of related or...
There you are. Okay.
Sexual relations... Was there any consideration about maybe he was getting, let's say, sexually tortured, or, well, I shouldn't say torture, but criminal activities were performed on him by maybe family or...
Did you catch any of that?
No, I didn't hear it.
You didn't hear any of it?
No.
Wow. Okay, so that's not going to work. That's strange. That should have come through on all of our Skype. But he wanted. It was really cutting in and out, so we're going to have to cancel. I'm sorry to say this, everyone, because the guest was not able to hear that call. We're going to have to cancel calls for the evening until I figure that out. Always work in progress here. So please, if you're listening, please do, sorry for the caller just then, please type your question in the chat room and I will get to it.
But yeah, about the breeding program, there was an instance where he did see a whole room of other people on the ship and believed that those were other people that were involved in the breeding.
You mean like families or?
Yeah, there's one painting he did, and I think it's on our site. But yeah, it looked like there was 30 or 40 other people that were with the beings, and it was the only time he saw other people with them, and believed that they were people that had similar experiences as him. And I guess it did seem like there was some type of breeding program going on.
Okay, so the question was, the caller had David ever asked the ETs what their intentions were in regards to interspecies breeding and why they needed hybrids? That was actually a very good question.
And the answer is I don't think he ever directly asked them, or if he did, he never got a straight answer. So he only speculates that it was that they lost the ability to breed themselves and needed human intervention, basically. And that, I mean, that's sort of the logical answer as well. But that's as far as it went.
And we have another one in here that this gentleman, J. Allen, writes, we think of greys as biohelpers. What species was this man actually breeding with? Did he ever consider it a species?
Yeah, I think he thought of them as separate species, and he thought of the women as hybrids themselves because, you know, they were around the same size as humans. They had all the right parts, and the only sort of different things was like the eyes and the face and the color of the skin. And he mated with those females, those hybrid females.
Okay. Here's another question. Living with him, spending so much time with him, how consistent was he with his narrative of what happened to him? If you felt he was lying, would you have been okay with not completing the documentary if you caught him lying?
So to answer the first question, so yeah, we filmed with him over probably I've known him and chatted with him for over 5 years, 6 years.
Wow. And
not once did one detail ever change in any context with any of the stories, which was, I think that's just impressive for like a 74-year-old in general to have that kind of like recall. But yeah, that was another sort of point for him in terms of believability, was that he wasn't making something up, was that nothing ever changed. And yeah, if I found out that he was doing it, you know, for other reasons like selling paintings or whatever else, or he had some kind of like scam in mind, then that would have been part of the film. And honestly, probably would have made it even more interesting as a film, like add a whole other layer to it. But yeah. No, it was just, David is what you see is what you get.
Oh, that's great. Now, there's a person in the chat room that says he's an experiencer as well, and he wondered if David ever mentioned anything about power outages.
No, he didn't. But what he mentioned was that when they were around, even in like broad daylight, was that there was just complete silence. He heard nothing at all. So even there could be a dog barking, a horn honking, and there was just utter silence.
Now, there's a question. I think you have already addressed this. Someone wanted to know if there was any possibility that the experience was related to sexual abuse, but you sort of touched on that, didn't you? Or that was physical abuse.
Yeah. So he never. I mean, he was pretty open and candid, telling me about, you know, that he would get punished and like hit, you know, just bench, bell, and this and that, but he never ever mentioned sexual abuse. And it's possible that happened and he didn't want to talk about it, or that he didn't remember it, but he never told me about it. And I'm not sure if he would have either. But yeah, it wasn't discussed. I just don't know if he had ever been sexually abused.
Okay. Now, do you believe there's another question in here? A lot of questions are coming in. So do you believe there's a chance his claims will prove to be true in the light of the recent UFO government revelations? I don't know if you've even paid attention to any of that. Have you?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I've been following all of that. And I think what they're doing is they're at least letting the conversation go further in regards to the topic, but I don't see much overlap. You know, David's story and the film isn't about like evidence and sort of like hard data like these government sightings and reports are. It's more about his experience and him as a person. So yeah, there's not too much overlap, but I do like that they at least are furthering the conversation.
Okay, I think this is a good question. Did they ever teach him anything in trade, like language, history, origin, stories, or anything interesting?
No, the only thing they ever, or the only message they ever gave him, was they were looking out at the Earth from the ship from afar, and the one of the beings, it was the tall, thin guy, just said, "It's a beautiful planet. You should keep it that way," and that was the only message he was ever given.
Yeah, and that's one you hear a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people talking about. And, take care of the plane. I think that's very, very good advice. And let's see. I'm going to, it may have been something that I did with the Skype. So I will attempt to take another call if someone wants to call in. And that's 603-967-4030. We'll try to take another call and see if that works. When it comes to something happening like this, did he ever want to get evidence of it? I mean, that's the thing that I would think of. Okay, this is happening. I think it's happening to me. I want some type of evidence that I can hold in my hand. Or
Yeah, I don't think he ever tried to take something, and a part of it is he felt controlled when he was with them, in a way. Maybe psychologically controlled. So he basically would either feel paralyzed or be complacent and do what they wanted. So I don't know if he could have grabbed something and taken something, even if he wanted to, or even if he could have. But he did, when he was trying to figure out if they were real, he bought flowers to give, real flowers to give to the female, and put them on his dresser in his bedroom, and they came that night. And when he woke up, the flowers were gone.
Wow. Well, that's the least he could do is buy flowers for all that activity he was having.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there a possibility that these events could be carried out by clandestine human group posing as ETs? That's a question in the chat room from Paul.
I think that's a possibility, but it seems such a difficult thing and convoluted thing to pull off. And why for this one old guy, from Georgia? I could see maybe if they were doing it to lots of people that were influential in some way, but David could have gone through his whole life and not told anybody. So I don't know what the purpose would have been, unless it was, to get some psychological data. But that doesn't seem, I think definitely, open to the possibility, but it doesn't seem very likely. What
made him first come out with this publicly and talk about it? Do you know?
I think he was always open to talking about it if someone asked him, but he never went out. There's a stigma against it. He doesn't want people to think he's crazy. So I talked to neighbors of his that had known him for 30 years and didn't know about these experiences. He just felt like the documentary would be a way to do it, because you could see and hear the whole story and then judge from that. So yeah, it's really been around. And he did appear in one film called The Hidden Hand. I'm not sure if people are familiar with, but it was just very sort of short segment that was more about the idea of extraterrestrials and government cover-up.
I see. A question in there. They wanted to know, did the beings ever indicate where they're from?
No, and he doesn't even assume that they're extraterrestrial. He says they could be interdimensional or supernatural. He doesn't assume anything, and they never told him.
They never did. Another person wants to know, did they ever say that at one day he would be called on for any type of task, or do you think that it was just a breeding thing?
He thinks that it was just purely for breeding.
I see. Wow. Okay. Hang on just a minute. I think that's it for right now. Again, if someone wants to call in, I will give it another try. That's 603-967-4030. The people that I know, there was that neighbor that sits on the stairway and talks to him. So people don't really, in his group, they don't really consider him a nut.
No, not at all. No. Everyone that knows him says he's like one of the nicest, most normal guys, down-to-earth guys that you'll meet. He just happens to have this completely out-of-this-world story.
Let's talk about his son, Michael. I think that's kind of an important part in your film. So what was that like talking to him, and can you just tell the audience a little bit about what he says?
Yeah, it was really surprising because, I sat him down and asked him, how was your childhood? And he said, oh, it was just like a normal childhood. And I was like, did anything strange or different about, you growing up? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, what about your father having had like hundreds of extraterrestrial encounters? He was like, oh yeah, well, that, I guess. So to him, it was like not weird at all. And was just a fact of his growing up. Was his dad painted these things and talked about these things, and he believed his dad, and he believes in ETs visiting the planet, but he's never seen one. He's never experienced one. He maybe thinks, I think that they're related to like supernatural experiences, like ghosts. But yeah, it was shocking almost how matter of fact he was about it all. And that he's like a pretty skeptical, rational, again, down to earth, like David type of guy. Yeah. But just accepted it almost completely at face value. Just, it was his dad, and that's what his dad said happened to him. So he believed it.
Yeah. Actually, when I was watching the film, that actually impressed me quite a bit. As logical as he seemed, and how, like you said, matter of factly, basically. Yeah, that was good. I'm glad you had him, chime in on it.
Yeah,
and that he accepts his dad the way he is, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now,
and I would have. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Interrupt.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have gotten his ex-wife in the film. That was planned from the beginning, and I thought it would be important to have a skeptical voice, but I really wanted it to be someone that knew David, and who better than his ex-wife, who most likely divorced him because of the stories. But I asked her about 10 times in all various manners, and she's perfectly nice and perfectly friendly, but she just flat out no every single time, and just wanted nothing to do with the film, which was sad. But I think that absence sort of speaks to what she would have said anyways, that she doesn't. And
right. Now, what about the audience and the screenings? How has that been going?
Oh, excellent. So we did like a film festival run across the country and some other countries, and just the audience responses in each part of the country were so different. Like Austin, Texas, at like a genre film festival, everyone was like, super into it and laughing, cheering. But then in like Utah, for example, it was a bit like people, they still liked it, but it was more sort of like a bizarre fascination. And then in Miami, which is like, I live here, but I gotta say it's not quite as cultured as a lot of other places. People just sort of laughed at him as opposed to laughing with. Like he was a little more of like a freak show sort of thing. So yeah, it's just been fascinating how each audience reacts, and actually had about 3 or 4 people in different places in the Q&A share their own abduction or UFO experiences, that they had one, in the 70s, had seen UFOs or had an experience with one. So I thought it was nice that after seeing the film, people thought it was a non-judgmental environment to bring up their own experiences.
Wow, that's an interesting aspect I would have never thought of.
Yeah.
And how about David? What did he think of the film? And his son, once again, did they actually attend like a screening together or something?
No, so I invited David to many screenings, but here's the ironic part is that David's afraid to fly on airplanes.
Uh-huh.
So he'll fly on UFOs, but airplanes are too turbulent for him. So it would have had to have been a screening in New York, which we didn't have. And then he mainly just watches films on VHS, which is really hard actually now to get a dub of to send to him. So for the longest time, like, he just didn't see the film. And then eventually I made him a DVD, and he got access to a DVD player and watched it. And thankfully he really liked it. I was really worried. I had no idea what he would think. And if he didn't like it, I don't know what I would have done. But he said he just really enjoyed it. And that was it. He's not a man of many words, and just said he dug it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a man without a computer, it's kind of hard to get that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get these questions organized. Do you know who, I don't know who this is, but Antonio Villas?
Yeah, Villas Boas, I think is the name. So he's someone that
the Brazil abductee.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very similar experience to David. But David didn't, or wasn't aware of him until much more recently.
I see. Does David, someone wanted to know in the chat, does David himself ever do interviews?
He does, yeah. And he's done a few since the film's been released, like radio and for articles. He's completely open to doing interviews.
All right, let's call him right now. Get him on the line. No, that wouldn't be nice to ambush him like
ambush
that.
him,
Yeah. So while you were working on this film, did you think it needed more than you already had? I know you went to Rice University in Texas and you did that interview, but did you think you were getting enough by just having these people involved, or had you thought about putting a skeptic in there as well?
I did. I was hoping that would be his wife. When I realized it wouldn't, I looked for like psychologists or psychiatrists to give their perspective. And one thing is that psychiatrists are actually like not allowed to diagnose or talk about someone that isn't a patient of theirs, which was interesting to find out. And the reason why that came out was that when Trump took office, you had a lot of psychiatrists coming out and saying that he's, crazy or mentally unfit. And the American Psychological or Psychiatric Association was like, you guys have to stop doing that because it's actually like not allowed within the association to diagnose like that. So, so I actually couldn't get them to talk about him. And then just started thinking about it, that I felt like the audience is the skeptic in this case. Like, even yourself, who's very open-minded to this sort of thing, you're coming at it from a skeptical viewpoint, and that you didn't need someone on screen saying, I think it's bullshit. What would that have actually added to the film? And I don't think it would have changed anyone's mind either way. And I think like that's what 99% of the coverage of this sort of stuff is look at this crazy or look at this quack. So I didn't want to further that narrative.
Yeah. I can't see that working easily enough. If you had someone debating him, it would be more like a confrontation. Couldn't
exactly.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, not productive.
Yeah. Now, is he still painting the same narrative?
He is, yeah. He still paints experiences, not quite as much, and also because he's covered so many of them now. But but it seems like he just does a few paintings a year, whereas before he would do, one every week or more.
One every week. That's
Yeah.
that's quite a bit. I mean, he must have a pile. I saw
He does.
the
It's
living room.
incredible. Yeah, when I walked into his studio the first time, it was just like hundreds, like just stacked 5-6 paintings deep all around the room and all along the wall and in his bedroom and just like, everywhere. These amazing paintings.
Okay. Does he do, now this is, I'm a bit of a painter myself.
Okay.
Does he do anything else, or does he just do just this narrative now? That's it?
I think he still does some like landscapes and still lives, but they're not nearly as interesting as his abduction paintings.
Little tiny alien in the landscape.
Exactly. Yeah. It completely transforms the painting. Like if you covered up the alien with your thumb, it's just an unremarkable impressionistic landscape. But as soon as you take your thumb away, it's like a bizarre, captivating image.
Yeah. So what about his future? Does he feel like things have run its course and, this is his story and that's basically it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think he's a little sad because of it. He misses them and wishes these experiences could actually continue. He even wishes he could join them or spend more time with them. But I think he's realized that the ship has sailed and, he's stuck here on Earth.
Now, was he, the thing I was thinking about earlier, I asked you if anything ever happened while he was in his marriage. You said no. Do you feel as though that if they were monitoring him, that they were respectful of that? Or do you think, did he talk about having other relationships where things were going on at the same time? Or did he talk about any of that?
When he was younger, he felt as though they were keeping him from having normal human relationships. And I believe in most of his young adult life, he did not have sexual relations with human women, that it was only Crescent pretty much until his marriage. And
Crescent was the name of
the female alien.
Girlfriends or whatever you want to...
Right.
Whatever you want to call her. So I was just wondering if, if these things were happening while he was in a relationship, did he feel like he was being unfaithful or, is that all part of the mix psychologically?
I don't think so, but he definitely felt like he was being kept from having like normal human relations while he was with them.
Yeah, I don't know. I have thought about, some of the abduction stories that I've heard, and I don't know how people can function at all. Having something like that going on. And I just don't know how you can't hide from it. But he never felt like this was a scary situation. He never felt intimidated or, right? He actually...
Right, yeah. It was only the first few encounters when he was... that were scary from them sticking the device or probe up his nose. He enjoyed it. It was all sort of interesting and enjoyable for him.
Yeah, that's something. How about Bobby wants to know, was there any type of other paranormal activity that happened in his house or around him or anything?
Not that anyone else noticed. Like, he had brothers and sisters, and his parents never noticed anything. David had other paranormal experiences, like knowing when his mother died across the country. He just sort of had a feeling and then had a dream about it, and then found out in the morning that his mother had died. So sort of precognitive or telepathic experiences like that he had. Yeah,
wow. I know that some people that claim that they are having experiences, will gain, something. We talked about this earlier. He didn't really gain anything, any language, any gifts, any trades, or anything like that. But some people have like an enhancement of something. Other than his art, he never talked about anything.
No, just that he's, for like a 74 or 75-year-old, he actually seems like to be in really good shape. Like, he's way more flexible than me. He sits in the full lotus position and like does yoga and all that.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to ask if there's any calls that anyone would like to call in. One more time, that number is 603-967-4030. And did they want to know, was he like, I believe this is in the film, he is sort of like frozen or he can't move, right?
Yeah, he felt sort of paralyzed, especially during the sexual encounters.
Now, you'll have some psychologists have claimed that these experiences are just, what do they call it, sleep paralysis?
Right, yeah.
But, I mean, he was awake, right, when a lot of these things according to him.
Yeah, most of them when he was younger were like daytime waking experiences. So sleep paralysis wouldn't fit the bill, but it's possible that for some of the nighttime ones when he was older that it is. But like, I've read reports of sleep paralysis and I've seen that film, The Nightmare, the documentary about it, and none of them are like pleasant erotic experiences. They're all like nightmarish experiences.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think we're going to be calling it a day. We have some buffering issues here. But,
no problem.
But I want to thank you so much. And
it was fun.
Let's talk about where people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so everything is on loveandsaucers.com. There's streaming links to see the film. There's a trailer. There's you can see prints, order DVDs, gallery, get in contact with us. It's all there. And then we're also on Facebook, Love and Saucers, and Twitter at Love and Saucers.
Okay, the buffering issue just stopped. I mean, we can continue going on, but I think I'm pretty much out of questions, but I'm just going to ask one more time if there's anyone that has another question. And it's been a lot of fun. It's an interesting topic, regardless of whether I believe it or not, it's still interesting. And I'm glad that you did this. I mean, that takes courage to do a film like this, and you did a wonderful job. Obviously, you have a lot of money into it and did a nice job on it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's fun, especially the chat here and getting all the questions from listeners. It's really unique.
Yes. All right. You take care.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Okay, everyone. So thank you so much. We are back next week. We have Marie from Montana, and she is a MUFON member, and her last name is Cisneros, I believe, and I have a hard time pronouncing that. I will get that down by the time I have the show. We're going to be talking about Montana and UFOs and missiles and all that. It's going to be a great show, and that's at the regular time, 8 o'clock next week. And so if you're listening now, you're either supporting the show or you're listening or watching on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. And it's my pleasure to be telling you that I'm going to be out in Arizona in 2 weeks. So if anyone's going to be attending that, the International UFO Congress, please look me up. I'd love to hang out with you. I'm going to be broadcasting live from there a couple of hours earlier. So that show will be 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time instead of the regular 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again, everyone. And I want to thank a few people. Peggy for managing the Facebook page. You can check us out. Our Facebook page has 20-some-odd thousand people on it. And Peggy is posting something almost every single day on there. I want to thank Alejandro Rojas for the UFO updates. Our guest, of course, Brad Abrahams, and Evan, the producer, for helping us out on the YouTube behind the scenes and audio and all that. So everyone, thanks so much, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.